Welcome to Success Weekly with James Tharris, a weekly dose of thought-provoking ideas and helpful tips on improving your mindset. And now, here's your host, James Tharris.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Success Weekly. I'm your host, James Tharris. Listen, I had a pretty interesting weekend, and the last few days have been interesting as well. So I don't know how many of you know that are listening to this, but I happen to live in Tarpon Springs, Florida, and we just had something called Hurricane Irma come through over the weekend, and we really had a big build-up to it over last week, actually. So we had several days' notice that it was going to be coming in. And initially, I wasn't too concerned with it. It was nice outside. We finally had some sun after, suffering through what seemed like months of rain after rain after rain after rain. And, we finally got a little sunshine, and so I wasn't really too worried about it. And everybody around me seemed to be frantically preparing, and, people were talking about leaving the state and all this. And, I really didn't have too much to worry about because I had an airplane flight booked from Tampa, Florida to Indianapolis on Friday. What would that date have been? Let me look at my calendar here. That would have been Friday, September 8th. And, of course, Thursday night, we got a text from the airline saying that my return flight, which was scheduled for Sunday, had been canceled. So I was kind of in a little bit of a pickle there, trying to figure out what to do, whether or not I should go ahead and go into Indianapolis, because our martial arts location there, we were hosting a black belt test, which we do only twice per year, and I have to sit in on the panel and test the students. So I was supposed to be there for this. But my wife was going to be here, left in Florida, all by herself with this hurricane, which neither of us have really been through before. In fact, I think she'd been through something minor with the tropical storms and things in the Marine Corps when she was stationed in Okinawa and North Carolina. Maybe a little inclement weather, but nothing like what they were talking about this particular storm was going to be. And so we started to watch the news, which was our first mistake. And they kept building it and building. They showed the eye of this storm and how big it was, and they were saying that this is a Category 5 storm, and they were even talking about recategorizing it as a Category 6, which has never been done before. And this was going to be the absolute worst storm that ever hit the United States or in the world, the biggest hurricane ever. And in some places, that's exactly what happened. Some of the islands, the Caribbean islands and Barbuda, or whatever the name of the place was, they got decimated. And then, of course, as it traveled up through Puerto Rico and Cuba and things, it started to make its turn towards Florida, and everybody started to panic. So they ran down to the grocery stores and bought up all the water. They bought up all the food on the shelves, and they lined up at the gas stations and literally drained all of the gasoline out of the local area gas stations. And it all happened so quickly that nobody really had any time to prepare past that. Our neighbors they weren't really doing anything with their houses. We didn't see any boards going up or anything like that until Saturday. And then all of a sudden, our neighbors to the left of us boarded their windows up, and our neighbors across the street boarded their windows up, and our neighbors behind us boarded their windows up, and we're thinking, we don't have any boards. We don't have a truck to get any boards, and even if we did, there were no boards available because they'd all been purchased by everybody else. And so there was no lumber, there was no water, there was no gasoline, there was no food. Many of the businesses closed down and boarded up, and they took off as well, the business owners and things. And everybody hopped on Highway 75, which is really the only way out of Florida, especially if you're on the Gulf Coast here. And it became a panic situation there as well, and traffic was moving at 5 miles per hour. There were accidents. People were running out of gas on the highway, and there was none to be had because of all the other people had already taken it all up. And so we sat back and said, okay, we're going to ride this thing out. How bad could this be? And then, of course, the closer we got to the actual event, the more we heard the news saying that it was going to weaken a little bit before it got to Florida, but because of the warm waters, it was going to re-strengthen and come through and hit us like nothing's ever hit Florida before, and it was going to devastate the entire state. And they put curfews out. There was a curfew in just about every county in this, at least in our area. There were 6 o'clock and 5 o'clock curfews. They closed down all the accesses to the bridges that led to the beaches. And there were crazy people. The newscasters were out there on the beaches broadcasting live. And there were crazy people out there on the beaches just to be there for the event. And I remember I remember watching, and they had just announced that there was nobody there, and then right in the background somebody walked by, and the lady turned around and says, "Oh, except for these people," and they zoomed in on them, and the people waved back, and they're literally walking on the beach in very inclement weather with these huge waves coming at them, and they think that it's fun. So a lot of the people that stayed behind, they were there, and one of the ladies actually said on camera that she was there because she wanted to be a part of it. And I was thinking, wow, this is insane. These people are literally risking their lives, and they're staying behind, and they're actually not in a house 20 miles away from the beach. They are on the beach. They're staying in a hotel or whatever. I don't know where they were staying, but they were actually walking down the beach and downtown Clearwater, which is right next to the beach, and they were excited about it. They were capturing video footage and things, and not realizing that their lives were in jeopardy. And then back at our house, we're thinking, wow, this is a lot worse than what we thought it was going to be. So I started to worry. And in fact, on Friday night, when we decided to cancel, Friday morning, we decided to cancel the flight to Indianapolis, because that last thing I wanted to have was to have a hurricane hit and something catastrophic happen to either my wife or to our house or both and to our business, and me not be here and get stuck in Indianapolis and not be able to get back here. And guess what? If I had gone to Indianapolis, I would still be there. I wouldn't have a flight back. They aren't letting any flights back in. As far as I know, I think we had a guest coming in this weekend, and their flight got canceled as well. So I'm very glad in the end that we didn't leave. But I'll tell you what, it was one heck of a scary experience. We started out sleeping in our normal bed, and of course we had power for a while, and at about 8:10 p.m. our power went out. And we started to look at each other and go, oh my goodness, what are we going to do now? Well, we're just going to wait it out and listen to the wind, and then when things get really bad, we'll go into our little safe zone, which in our house, we don't really have a safe zone because we have a big open floor plan, and all of the bedrooms are basically, well, not basically, they're right at the edge of the house. So every bedroom has windows in it, and every room has windows in it, a lot more windows maybe than many other houses would have. And, of course, out in the back is a pool and a screened-in lanai, which is the screened-in porch that covers the pool. We call them a bird cage down here. But so we really didn't have any safe place in the house except for the far bedroom that was to the northwest corner of our house. And we made a little extra bed inside of a closet and, put down a blanket, a nice big comforter to create a little bit of a cushion, and took our pillows in there. And then, of course, we ended up in there shortly after maybe 10 or 11 o'clock in the evening because the wind really started picking up. And it got very scary, actually. And with all the windows in our house, I mean, you could see the trees being blown like crazy, all the leaves, the big palm trees in front of our house and behind the house, just they were like bending in half. And we had these huge gusts of 100 miles an hour plus come through, and thinking, oh my goodness, this is getting serious. And so we headed into the closet and hunkered down. I hate to use that word. I really, after this weekend, I've heard that word used so many times, and it's almost like listening to, if you were back in 1991, I think's the year when Whitney Houston's I Will Always Love You song came out, and they played it like every 5 minutes, it seemed, and it got to the point when you heard the melodies of that song come on, you almost developed a gag response to it. And that's kind of how we are here in Florida now towards the term hunker down. But and I had to look up that word on Google, by the way, to find out what the heck does hunker down mean. And it really means to crouch down. And so it is a pretty accurate term, because we were crouching down and we were trying to, stay out of harm's way. And it was a very scary experience. We tried to get to sleep, but we're in this little tiny closet. There's no heat in the house, and in Florida it's very hot. There's no air condition, no air circulation whatsoever, and we're sitting in this laying in this little closet. And every time we try to fall asleep, the other one of us either had to get up to use the restroom or turn to shift, just shift your position from left to right or whatever, and every little movement the other person feels and picks up on. So it's very difficult for either of us to get to sleep, and so we didn't really get much sleep at all. Really, Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, or Sunday night. I think we got our first good night's sleep maybe Monday. No, actually, that was Tuesday, because Monday, that's when the which was 9/11, by the way. Monday morning is when the storm. That's when it happened. It hit Sunday night and early Monday morning, and it really lasted until about 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. And even after that, several hours, we had very high gusts of wind that were very powerful. So it didn't really completely end until about noon on Monday, which was September 11th. And then, of course, it got light outside about 7:30 or 8 o'clock, and the first thing we did was to go out and assess the damage. And we looked around. We started by looking out front, and we didn't see a whole lot of problems out front, except for some little pieces of tree limbs and things that have been blown off, and leaves and things like that, things you'd expect after some kind of a storm, any kind of a storm, not a hurricane, but any kind of a storm. And then we went out back, and we noticed that in our pool there were big branches with leaves still on them, and we looked up at our screen, and there was a big hole in one of them where the tree branch had actually been blown through and then right into our pool. And then another section of the screen, or two sections of the screen, they were about 5 foot by 5 foot, so about 10 feet by 10 feet. The whole screen was gone and laying down inside the porch area there. There was debris everywhere, and it turned out that out of our entire neighborhood around our little block of about 20 houses, we got hit the worst. And we were very thankful that that's all it was. It was inconvenient. We did have running water the entire time, but our electricity was out for about 24 hours. But fortunately, we had brought a generator with us from Indiana, and we were able to find one gas station that had some gas left, and we filled up these all we had were, I think there were 1 gallon gas cans, 3 of them. We filled those up. We went back to the house and filled the generator with those 3 gallons, went back to the gas station, got 3 more gallons, came back and filled the generator up, and that's about all it held, was about 6 gallons. And we fired the generator up and plugged our refrigerator in and charged our phones up and things with it, and let the generator run out in front of our house for probably about 12 hours or so. And I decided at about 8 o'clock in the evening that I was going to be polite to our neighbors and turn the generator off, because that's the last thing I would want to hear when I'm trying to sleep in the evening, is somebody's generator out in front running all night long. So I was a little bit self-conscious, and I try to be respectful to my neighbors around me and to other people around me, and so I don't like to make a lot of noise or be the cause of somebody else's stress. And so I turned the generator off, and probably within about 20 minutes the power came on, which was a blessing. So the first time they tried to turn the power on, we noticed it early in the afternoon, and then it lasted for about 30 seconds, and we heard the big transformer boom sound, and it shut off again. And I thought, at least we can tell that they're working on it. And then about an hour later, maybe, they tried it again a second time, and it lasted maybe 30 seconds again, and that big boom sound, we heard it again outside, and no power. And then finally, about an hour later, we heard it one more time, and we kept our fingers crossed, and true to the saying, third time's the charm, it stayed on. And that was literally like 10 or 15 minutes after I turned the generator off. And it was great to have the electricity come on again, because we were able to turn the television on, watch the news, check the email and things, because our phones wouldn't work very well without the internet. Even with our 4G and LTE services, it was really, really slow. It was like worse than dial-up speeds. And I was able to at least use my Facebook Messenger and text people, and I could get a message through to them, but I couldn't get any video or I couldn't post any pictures or anything like that because the connection was so terrible. So it was really great to have the what do you call it, the electricity back on, and that'll enabled us to turn on our AC again and get some cool air in the house again, which was a really great relief. Now today is what is it? Wednesday, September 13th, 2017, and there are still reportedly 400,000 people in our area that don't have power still, and it may be until Friday until their power comes back on. Additionally, many of the people who fled the state to get away from this hurricane now can't get back into the state because of all the flooding and things that they had from the tropical storm. I'm getting these messages. I need to close out this, so we don't keep getting these beeps here. So that's from Facebook. But anyway, now I lost my train of thought. The people that got out of here successfully can't get back in, and so now they're having actually more difficulty trying to get back in than they did trying to get out, and it may be even a few more days before they're able to get in. Schools have been closed the entire week, and they will not reopen until Monday. So that's kind of our current situation. Fortunately for us, as soon as we checked the damage at the house, we hopped in the car before we had any other time, and anybody had any time to get out on the roads. At least we hoped. We started to headed out of our addition, and we saw some of the trees that have been pulled up by their roots. One happened right next door to our neighbors. One of the trees in their yard, it was a big, probably 30-foot tree, literally pulled up by its roots and laid down in the yard. That's how powerful some of these winds were. And as we were driving out of the addition, we saw a couple more of those things and thought, wow, we really dodged a bullet here. Because look at these huge trees that have been uprooted. They weren't just snapped in half, they were totally uprooted. Can you imagine what kind of wind force it would take to actually lift a tree, pull a tree out of the ground by its roots and lay it on the ground on its side? Well, that's happened in more places, several places that we saw. But as we were leaving our addition, we took a left and started heading west towards what we call U.S. Highway 19 North, heading towards our school to check out the damage here because we were worried about it. And in fact, I got so worried that I drove back down to the school on Saturday afternoon, or maybe, excuse me, it was Sunday afternoon, I guess, when I started to hear about these storm surges that were going to come in, and they were going to be 8 to 10 feet high, and anything that was, underneath that level was going to get flooded and soaked and things. And I started thinking, wow, I can't afford to lose my computer and my data and all these things that I have at the school here, and there's really no safe place for it, but I've got to go get that stuff. And so I drove down in the wind to the school, and I realized that one of our banner flags, in fact, it was the only banner flag that was still left in our business, was left out there, and I didn't even think about that until I got here, and I thought, wow, I'm so glad that I saw this because everybody else pulled theirs in. And so I grabbed the flag and tried to multitask by grabbing the flag and turning it parallel to the ground and kind of like holding it like a jousting pole and drive very slowly into the parking lot so that I could get to the front door and take this flag in. And as soon as I turned the corner to navigate into our shopping plaza, the banner flag hit the ground and went underneath the tire, and I had to stop the car, and then of course I then pulled the flag and thought I'd broke it in two, and I thought, oh, this is great, this is a $400 flag here that just got snapped in two because of my stupidity. Fortunately, what happened was the flag got stuck underneath the tire, and the tire rolled over a little bit and caused a little bit of a tear, like road rash on the flag. And nothing, it wasn't major, but I was still upset about it. And I thought, oh, great, And I took it in to the school, and then I went in and I took all the computer things apart, set them up on shelves, and took everything I could get up off the floor and put it up on the shelves, hoping that this storm surge wouldn't get that high. And I started to worry, so I grabbed all of my hard drives and things, put them in little plastic baggies. What are those things called? You put your sandwiches in, sandwich baggies. There's another name for them. Anyway, and I ziplocked. There you go. I ziplocked the bag and put all the hard drives up on a shelf in the house. And I felt, I got back to the house and felt, okay, this is the best that I can do. A lot of the other martial arts school owners asked me, did you take up your mats? And I said, no, I didn't, because I didn't have time to do it to begin with. And the way that we laid the mats down, they're cut into some strange pieces, and so if I would have taken them up, I was worried that I might not be able to get the mats to go back down the way that they were. Plus, these mats are really heavy, and there are, I don't know, 200 and some mats in here, or maybe 150, or I don't know. There's a lot of mats, and for one person to try and move these things, it just was not going to be a good idea. So I decided, I've got insurance, and hopefully it covers it. So I'm preparing as much as I can. I get back to the house then. And then, of course, we went through the whole hurricane thing. We saw the damage at our house, and I started to head back to the school. And as I turned out of the addition, some guy flashed his lights at me, and I thought, well, why did he flash his lights at me? That doesn't make any sense. My lights aren't on. They're not off. It's daylight. And about 100 yards ahead, I realized why he was flashing his lights at me, because the road was blocked by a fallen tree that had covered the entire lane that was traveling west. And so I had to, fortunately, there was not a lot of traffic out, so I hopped into his lane with the oncoming traffic and made it the extra block or two that I needed to make it past this tree, and proceeded about my way. And as we got closer to the school, we saw, lots of signs were torn, and, businesses, they had people who parked their cars in front of the doors, but they parked them parallel to their doors to kind of block the wind and rain from getting in. And we saw a lot of little, damage like that, but nothing major. So we pulled into our plaza, and lo and behold, our open sign was on. We didn't turn it on, but it was on, and so were most of the other people in our plaza, because the power had shut off, and then it came back on and left our open sign on, and somehow it triggered the open signs to turn on. And we came in to assess the damage, and fortunately there was absolutely no damage to our school whatsoever, with the exception of me running over the banner flag, which was complete stupidity on my part. I should have parked the car, walked back the 200 yards to get this flag and grabbed it and taken it in, but I didn't. I had to try to take a shortcut and multitask, which is another lesson in itself. So nonetheless, everything turned out great in the end, and it turned out that we ended up, instead of a Category 5 hurricane or even a Category 3, which is what they were insisting we were going to get, we ended up with a Category 1 hurricane. And our lives were spared, and our home was spared, our business was spared, and I have to believe that has a lot to do with all of the prayers that came our way from our family and friends from out of state. And I thank you guys for that. It's amazing sometimes what positive energy and prayer can do, and how things work. So I have to believe that that's what happened. So now that I've given you all this information, what does this have to do with success? Well, it has a lot to do with success, because as long as when bad things happen to people, as long as you learn lessons from it, you look for the strawberry in this situation. And usually, sometimes the strawberry is the lesson itself. So when the tornado hit the school in Indianapolis back in 2002, we actually got, the place got demolished. And I thought my world was over. I thought my business was over. I thought I was going to be, end up working in a fast food restaurant, flipping hamburgers for the rest of my life, or working as a DJ or something. And I didn't know what was going to happen. And it was kind of a rough time, and so I learned a lot of things through this. And so one of those things is the old adage that says, "Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me." So what we really learned through this whole fiasco was to take it more seriously. Well, and I should say I should take it more seriously, because my wife was taking it much more seriously than me in the beginning, and probably still is. But I'm not one to worry until it's time to worry. And I think that's a double-edged sword. It works, because there's a fear, is false evidence that appears real, false evidence appearing real. And so I've really taught that for many years, and I've probably programmed myself to be like that to a large degree. And so I try not to worry until I need to worry. And so everybody else was, frantically pacing about and trying to get out of Dodge. And a lot of my friends were saying, "You better get out of there." And I was just telling, "Hey, I got nowhere to go." And really, I didn't have anywhere to go. I could have gotten out on that airplane and gone to Indianapolis, but my wife would have been left here. And, I would have felt awful if she had to have sat in that closet for 12 hours without me being here and go through that by herself with absolutely nobody in the area that she knows. So where was I going to go? We weren't going to get into our cars and try to get into this big mad mess of going north on 75 to try to get out of Florida. And even if we had gotten out of Florida, where would we have gone? And, yes, we could have gotten out of harm's way, but our house was here, our business was here, and if we had gotten out, we would still not be open. And right now, we can't afford to be open because we're fully invested here, fully vested into this school with everything that we've got. And and I think that's part of why God spared it. We spared us and spared the school and spared the house because He knows this. And we really couldn't afford to leave and then have this place be closed for a week or 2 weeks, because we don't have any staff members that could run it for us or students that could teach classes or open for us. We didn't know, nobody else has keys to this place but us. And so we were stuck here. We had to just take our chances and ride it out, and unfortunately it turned out for the best. But we're not without the lesson is not lost on us. It's not lost on me, and that is my wife immediately jumped onto Amazon as soon as we had opportunity to do so and ordered 3 big 5-gallon gas cans. And we're going to, as soon as gas comes back here, we're going to fill those gas cans up and have them ready in case another emergency happens. And we're going to get some fuel stabilizer. We are going to get some things to be able to batten down the hatches at the house and board up the windows and do the same thing here at the business. We are going to take pictures of the mats and put numbers on the bottom of them and things, so in case we have to lift them up and stack them someplace, that we can get them up off the floor and get them back down very quickly. So those are things that we learned through the process of this, and that's part of being successful, is learning from your failures. Because in my life, I don't know how it is in your life, but in my life I've had a lot more failures than I have had successes. However, each time I've had those failures, I've learned from those mistakes and those failures, those setbacks. So sometimes those things that are well out of my control, like the tornado. I had nothing that I could have done to prepare for that tornado back in 2002. And it was totally we were totally at God's mercy and Mother Nature's mercy. And what happened, and I ended up $70,000 in debt. But because of a lot of things that happened at that time, right around the exact same time. I mean, when that tornado came through, it was like an omen about what was going on in my personal life at that time, in my school life as well. It was a very a time filled with turmoil, but it turned out to be a catalyst to great things afterwards, great growth in my personal life, great growth in my business life, in our school, doubled and then tripled right after that. And if those things hadn't have occurred prior to that, it was like a pruning process. If those things hadn't occurred and that tornado hadn't have been the final straw that broke the camel's back, then we would have never experienced those successes. And so the same thing holds true here. Going through this hurricane has been a very frightening experience, but a big learning experience as well. And, one of my good friends down here, John Graydon, who's a very well-known person in the martial arts world, I did a lot of, speaking to him about where to move when we moved down here, and where to open a school, and where the best place to have a house was, and where all these things. And we were looking around the entire state of Florida trying to figure out whether the north side was better, the south side was better, the east coast was better, the west coast was better, and we really ended up largely based on Master Graydon's recommendation here in Palm Harbor, Florida. And one of the things he said that I remember very well was, hey, one of the great things is we haven't been hit by a hurricane in over 10 years. And so the first thing I thought was, well, that means that we're probably overdue. And I turned out to be correct on that, and I wish I hadn't been. Hopefully, it's going to be many, many, many more years before we get hit with something like this again. And many of my neighbors also have been here 10 to 12 years or less than that, and they've never ridden through a hurricane either. And so that was their first time as well. So nobody in our neighborhood really had been through anything like this before. And so it was a very big learning experience for us. And that's what success is based on. And one of the things that I really talk about is you learn from your mistakes. And it's again, shame on, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. So that means that if a hurricane were to come through again, and we were in the same situation, being unprepared, that would be totally our fault, and we would deserve whatever happened to us. But that's not going to happen. We are going to be completely prepared. We've already made notes and things, and like I said, she's ordered the gas cans, and we're going to get a lot of other things in order so that if this ever happens again, we'll be prepared. So, and I really feel bad about this particular podcast, because this is really my third attempt at making a podcast with this subject matter in mind. I made one Friday night that I recorded, and it was a very, it started out very similar to this podcast, and then as I started to really, I had no sleep for, I wasn't sleeping Wednesday night, I didn't sleep Thursday night, obviously, and Friday I was like 2.5 days without much sleep, and I was in a different frame of mind that night, and I remember this, and I actually have it still recorded. I actually uploaded it to my podcast website and put it out there, and then I woke up the next morning and I thought, wow, there was a lot of personal information I put into this podcast, because as I started to talk about, I was very afraid at the moment because of all the newscasting and things, and that's another lesson is don't watch the news during these kind of things, because they will drum it up and really ramp things up 2 or 3 levels higher than what it needs to be and get people frantic, and that's the reason that people clogged up the freeways, and that's the reason why people ran down to the grocery stores and grabbed everything they could, and that's the reason why they went to the gas stations and sucked out all the gas from the area, because of the news cycle and what they told us was going to happen, and really none of those things happened, and now people that bought into all that stuff, they're trying to get back here into Florida, and really they're more stressed out now because they don't know. They're worried about their houses, and even though people have told them everything's fine, they want to see it with their own eyes. And I can understand, I was the same way when the tornado hit. I couldn't wait to get back to see what had happened at the school. But, it was a lot worse there. So anyway, I started recording this podcast, and the more I started to talk about it in this state of mind where I was afraid, I started thinking back to this tornado situation, and it led me back to all the other events that were taking place in my personal life and my business life at that time. And I started to talk about these things in great detail. And I thought, well, this is what it is, and I'm going to put this out there. And I posted it, and fortunately, I didn't see a lot of activity on it, and I deleted it. I was like, wow, I don't think I'm ready to share all that with everybody. A lot of my closest friends and family know about these things, but maybe the whole world doesn't need to know about these things. And so I took it off. And then yesterday morning, I decided to, on the fly, to record a podcast in my podcast app on my phone, which I'd never done before. And we didn't have our internet back up yet, and so it was all. I thought that it was going to be a recording on my phone that I was going to be able to save and upload later when the power came back on. And I tried uploading it, and then, of course, that whole podcast disappeared. And in my opinion, it was like 10 times better than the one I just did today. I mean, I really hit a lot of great points with success, and I can't even think of some of the things I talked about. I tried to remember what I could the best here to put into this podcast, but there were a lot of great lost nuggets in that podcast. It might have been my best podcast to date, and I'm still hopeful that someday I'll figure out where the heck it went, and it'll pop up somewhere that I can post it, because it was really good. But nonetheless, we made it through the storm safely. We learned a lot of things about Florida that we didn't know before, and a lot of things about hurricane prep that we didn't know before. If you did enjoy it, please let me know that in the comments. Now we're going to be ready. So we don't ever want to see this happen again, but if it does happen again, we're going to be prepared for it. And really, that's if you're going through something in your life, maybe you didn't go through a hurricane, but maybe you're going through a lot of negative events that are happening in your life currently. Understand that they're happening for a reason, and usually on the other side of these things, as bad as they get, and unless we get killed in the process of them, there's the old saying that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I really believe that, and during the end of that podcast that I recorded Friday night, I got kind of emotional, because I was really thinking this could be another repeat of the tornado, and man, I could be like out of business. I could lose my house, and we could lose everything here. And wow, what an ominous thought to look at that. And I looked at the pool out back. We had to take everything from the back porch of the pool, which was a lot of stuff, furniture and other things, and pull it into the house. So the whole house was cluttered. And then I looked out at the pool in the back, and it looked just like it did when we moved in. And I thought, wow, is this going to be the end of living here? And maybe we're going to die. Who knows? And so the last thing that I said when I signed off on that podcast that I recorded Friday night was that I don't know what's going to happen, but if it does happen, I'm going to come back bigger and stronger better than ever before, just like I did in 2002. And that was one of the things that I talked about in the other podcast that I created that night and the one that I created yesterday that I'm really disappointed didn't make it to the air, is that I talk about this a lot to my students, I talk a lot about this to my friends, and I talk a lot about these on my podcast as well, and that is that it's not what happens to you, it's how you respond to what happens to you. And so I could have chosen to freak out and leave the state and fly to Indiana and stay there. But my wife wasn't going to go with me, so there's no way I was going to do that. I could have freaked out here and been running around, like a lot of other people were, talking about the sky is falling like Chicken Little, and I didn't do that either. I maintained a calm, cool-headedness, and I didn't worry about it. I thought there's no point in worrying until I have to worry, so let's wait until we start hearing this wind and these trees, and if we start hearing some bangs and crashes outside, then we'll get worried, which kind of is what happened, and I got worried. And I had to protect my wife and took her into the closet, and we slept in there the whole night until the morning, and woke up with stiff necks and really not much sleep at all. If I got an hour of sleep that night, it was a miracle. And of course, she is a little bit claustrophobic, and so for her to get into that closet really meant that she must have been really scared. And I did the best that I could as the husband to be the protector and keep things under control. But anyway, I guess I could ramble about this for the next hour, and I don't think you want to hear me do that. So I'll kind of close things off with a couple of thoughts here, and that's that bad things happen to good people all the time, and just keep in mind that if you're going through some bad things in your life right now, no matter how terrible they may seem, there are lessons to be had from them that can help propel you further along in your life and make you much more successful in a much shorter time having these experiences. And so that's really what makes a master at anything. A master at martial arts is somebody that's gone through a lot of experiences and had experience teaching and working with hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of people, and they start figuring out all of the problems that can occur that they didn't expect that were going to occur, with people with different types of personalities, and people with different types of disorders like ADD and ADHD, and this newer one, OCD, or ODD, oppositional defiance disorder, which I learned about probably about 8 years ago, and I thought, wow, I've never heard that before. And that's pretty much when somebody doesn't like to take orders from somebody, and so I'm thinking, well, why would you want to bring them to a martial arts program? Because that's pretty much all they're going to get, is be told to sit down, stand up, bow to the flags, bow to each other, do this, do that. It's just nothing but getting orders from your instructor and you following them, carrying out the orders. So nonetheless, working with people like that with all these different kinds of issues helps to make you a better instructor. And so in order to make that relationship work, you have to figure out how to get through to somebody with ODD or OCD or ADHD or ADD or any of these autism and other things, and you have to figure out how to still function as an instructor and make the program fit that person and help them through these situations. And some people have anxiety, and back when I first started teaching martial arts, I don't know that I dealt with much of that at all. It was more like everybody was kind of normal. I don't remember having any really different situations with students in the very beginning, but slowly as I continued teaching and had more people come in, more of those kind of people came in, and I had to figure out how to teach them and how to get them through the curriculum and get them to black belt and beyond. And so that's what makes a master, those things. And so in your life, every experience you have gives you knowledge and insight and wisdom that you wouldn't have had that experience not happened to you. And I even read a meme a couple of days ago. It might even have been yesterday, and I thought it was pretty powerful. And it was like something about, I'm going to paraphrase it, it was something about, how your mother can spot a fake friend weeks, months, or years before you finally catch on to it. And why is that? That's because your mother or your father, they've been around the block a few times, and they've been on this earth long enough to experience fake friends and know what the signs and symptoms of them are. And so when they come into your life, they can kind of spot, oh, that guy's not going to be any good for you, that person's not good for you, why don't you get them out of your life? I don't want them in my house. And we sometimes can't see it. That's because we haven't gone through it enough and got burned enough to really understand. And I remember, I was going to end this podcast, but I guess I have another thought or two. Back in 2010, I called a good friend of mine in the martial arts who's been here a lot longer than I have and is a very successful man, and he actually worked alongside some of the top people in the industry and continues to do so, in fact. And I called him up, and I was disgusted with a few things that were going on in our martial arts industry, and I wanted to talk to him about it and get his take on it and whether or not I was thinking correctly and viewing it correctly, and if he had any different opinions on it. And he likes to use a lot of colorful words, we'll just say. So I will paraphrase what he said as well. And he basically said, James, you just haven't got burned enough. When you get burned enough, you'll start developing a thicker skin, and you'll stop letting people get away with things like this in your life. And at the time, I thought, well, I have been burned a lot, but maybe he doesn't understand. He just doesn't get it. And I hung up the phone with him, and I thought, wow, that was kind of a wasted phone call. I thought he was going to give me some real gems of wisdom there, and actually he did. But it wasn't until several years later that those words finally rang true in my mind, and I thought, wow, that was some of the best advice or just statements that I've ever heard in my entire life when it regards to business or relationships. And you just haven't get burned enough. When you finally get burned, that's when you start realizing that everything's not as rosy and beautiful and wonderful as we all think it is sometimes. And we look at people, and we like to think that everybody's inherently good, and we've all got good inside of us. And if you looked at the news, I don't know how much you followed it, but down here in Florida, there were both sides of that equation. And we had people they were coming out, and we were checking on each other. The neighbors were knocking on the door, hey, are you guys okay? Do you need anything? And we were doing the same thing for our neighbors. And this was kind of a wonderful experience, a wonderful bonding experience. Whereas in other parts of our state, they had video of these teenage thugs or young 20-somethings, whatever they were, breaking into businesses that were boarded up and taking advantage of the fact that there was this emergency situation going on, and they were not going into these businesses and stealing food and other things they might need to survive the storm. No, they were going in and stealing tennis shoes by the box full, and running out and laughing about it, And fortunately, they got caught in the act, and they were on the news and things. And I think these guys should be they should have the book thrown at them, and really the harshest punishment possible, because they took advantage of a situation where we were all locked down and fearing for our lives, and these guys were out stealing freaking tennis shoes in the middle of a storm, and what an awful thing to do. And so it's when you see things like that you start, especially for younger people that haven't really lived much and been through it, to see that there are people out there that don't have good intentions. They have bad intentions, and they're just inherently bad people, and they don't want to be better, and they're not trying to better themselves. They're just trying to look for any way that they can take advantage of society. And that's the kind of people we're talking about when we try to educate some of our youth on the fact that not everybody's good. We all have good in us, but in this case, there are some people out there that don't have any good in them, and they're just looking for the opportunity to take advantage of and exploit whatever situation they can for their own personal gain. They're not here to help anybody but themselves. And that's part of mastering life, is realizing that there are people like that, and you have to learn how to navigate this world and look for those kind of people and try to steer clear of them. And if nothing else, in situations like that, that's the lesson, that's the strawberry in it, to let you know that maybe your first thoughts about humanity were maybe needed a little tweaking. And if you didn't have these experiences and see how certain people respond, you would never imagine that people could be like that. And so if you're going through something in your personal life and you're thinking, wow, I don't know if I can make it through here, or you're even having worse thoughts about, maybe this world would be better off without me and things, stop those thoughts, because these things are happening to you and around you because you need to learn some lessons. I mean, that's part of why we're here on this earth, I think, is to be observers and experiencers of this life, so that we can see all the different nuances to life. And what can we glean from it? What can we take from this situation that's happening and learn from it to make the next 5 or 10 or 20 years better? And how can we positively impact somebody else's life? I mean, that's the reason I'm doing this podcast, guys. I'm not doing this just for my health. I'm doing this because I want to share what little knowledge or wisdom I might have through my own personal experiences, and most of them negative experiences, by the way. Most of them failures and challenges and setbacks. And hopefully I can break through to one person out there that's listening that may be going through some challenges in their own life, or they're trying to strive for more success in their lives, but they're thinking, if I listen to Tony Robbins, yes, that's motivational. And by the way, I listen to Tony Robbins, and I really get a lot from him. But the man's a multi-millionaire, maybe even a billionaire by now. I don't know. It's hard to relate to somebody like that. He talks about his struggles in the beginning, but it was 30 some years ago when he had that, and living in the back of his car, and didn't have 2 nickels to rub together and things. So for people that purchase his programs or other public speaker programs and motivational speaker programs, it's hard to relate to some of these guys because they're in the public eye now, and they're very wealthy now. And they didn't start out that way, but I'm not there yet. I'm in my life, I'm very successful in comparison to where I was at, just 10 years ago or 20 years ago, by far. But I'm nowhere near any of those guys. And so hopefully somebody listening to my podcast can relate more to somebody like me that is closer to their level. And I'm not the most successful person in our community, but by far either. But I have had some success, and I've learned a lot through a lot of the failures and challenges and setbacks that have happened and occurred to me over my life. And that's why I'm doing these podcasts. I want to share some of what I've learned, and hopefully it can help somebody that's on the bottom rung of the ladder, about to jump off and end things, or they don't think that they've kind of mentally thrown the towel in and given up. And I want to help that person climb up a couple of rungs on that ladder until they get to the point where they can then maybe jump off my ladder onto Tony Robbins' ladder, or Deepak Chopra's, or Oprah Winfrey's, or Maria Forleo, or any of these great people that are steps above where I'm at. The people that I listen to and go to for advice. People like John Maxwell. And of course, Tony Robbins, and then the now deceased folks like Zig Ziglar, and these guys really, Jim Rohn. They climbed way up the ladder of success, but they all had humble beginnings. Just about every single one of them had humble beginnings. There might be an exception or two here and there. Larry Wingett, another favorite of mine. If you like my podcasts, I guarantee you would absolutely love Larry Wingett's podcasts and his books and things. So if you like it kind of right between the eyes, getting hit right between the eyes with straight truth without somebody sugarcoating it, then that's who you need to go to. So anyway, I'm rambling on here. This was not a scripted podcast by any means. I did feel like I wanted to get it out there. And again, the third time's the charm here, even on this podcast, apparently. Because it's out here now, but wow, I really wish I could have gotten that one yesterday, because it was so much more powerful, I thought. Anyway, that's what I've got for you this week, and I am planning a special bonus live podcast with an interview with a good friend of mine, Mike Storms, who's a very successful martial arts school owner and mentor to hundreds of other school owners in the United States, and hopefully things work out, and I am able to get with him Friday morning. I think we've scheduled it for 10 o'clock in the morning, maybe 10 to 10:30. So if you do enjoy my podcast, check for me live on Facebook this coming Friday morning, and hopefully will be with you with Mike Storms. And until then, this is James Theris saying, be successful.
That's all for this week. Tune in next week for another episode of Success Weekly. Do you have an idea you'd like James to talk about in an upcoming episode? Post your comments and be sure to share this podcast with friends.